Finally, the hero of Nigeria's democracy has arrived. He shall usher us into a new phase of development, peace, and prosperity. He is the father of the new Nigeria, His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari, GCFR. Welcome to another season of giving Nigerians hope yet again. We are sure of a great future for both ourselves and generations yet unborn. We look forward to your leading us as a nation into our manifest destiny. Though the challenges against us as a people are many, we know that your leadership shall set us on the right path to our greatness. A new dawn beckons on us all, and having you as our president is a precursor to this. Thank you for believing in Nigeria. This message is from the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA.
Norwich City are desperate for another 3 points in their battle for survival in the Premier League. Can they cause an upset against the Hammers? This Saturday, it's West Ham United versus Norwich City on the Premier League Live, showing on the network service of the NTA from 3:30 p.m. The Premier League Live is brought to you by Baba Ijebu and powered by Integral.
We thank you for staying with us up to this moment, and as a prompt for our conversation, which is on getting discourse to work better in Nigeria, let's take the excerpts from the first part of our conversation yesterday as packaged by Joseph Osen.
Government has been working to resolve the issues within the power sector. For instance, the portion of the tariff that these coals could not charge, because government has said the tariff should not go beyond so limit, which we call the market shortfall. Government has taken responsibility for that, and in order to clean up the books of the discos and make them attractive. Secondly, the issue of power theft is a very serious problem. And the issue of a legislation that will make it a criminal offense and a very serious offense if anybody steals power is what we've been calling for in the power sector.
On a monthly basis, we do receive a market invoice of close to 7 billion naira. Since we took over this company almost 7 years ago, there was never a month we collect half of that amount. That is 3.5 billion. This indebtedness cut across all strata of the electricity consuming public. Privates, individuals, governmental agencies, ministries, departments, and agencies.
Since privatization, consumers have been investing in network, government have been investing in network. The investors in quote have not really added value. The money they collect, sometimes they make 10 billion in a month collection, sometimes they make 15 billion in a month. There was a time NEC even lowered the threshold. They say remit 20% and keep 80%. Even the bill Kaduna is talking about, how did they arrive at it? When you give a customer that was capped last year at 3,000 naira per month or 4,000 naira per month, and now they are paying 15,000, how do you arrive at that? When you have capping. So NEC keep chalking out regulation without follow-up. So these are the issues.
When you are trying to, you want to make your child to work, you don't tell your child to run almost immediately. These are Nigerian companies. Nigerians are working there. So you are not going to regulate them out of existence. These companies were formed. You need to make them to work. When they have attained this level, you raise the standard again. The standard are being raised every now and then. We call them, so okay, I want to achieve this level. This is your next assignment. You match up. So, but if, because you want things done in a hurry, you crash the system.
All right. Thank you very much there for those excerpts from the first part of our conversation yesterday. Today, of course, we have a set of guests plus one who was with us yesterday, and that is Yunana Malo, who is Director of Energy at the Bureau for Public Enterprises. Mr. Yunana Malo, pleasure to have you back on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Nigeria.
Okay, and also here with us in the studios is Rumudaka Wonodi, pioneer, managing director and CEO of the Nigeria Bulk Electricity Trader, that's NBET, and is a former member of the Presidential Task Force on Power, is currently CEO ZKJ Partners. Mr. Wonodi, pleasure to have you with us on the program.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Nigerians.
Thank you.
All right, we have Abel Nechaziem. He's a chief state head, Edo State, and also supervising corporate communications department, BEDC Electricity PLC. He's reaching us from our Benin studio. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Nigeria. Thank you very much.
All right, also on the program is the Dean, Faculty of Law, University of Lagos, Professor of Comparative Corporate Law and Governance Systems, former Senior Special Assistant to Ondo State Governor on Power, Professor Ige Bolodoku. I hope I got that correctly. Bolodoku. Sorry, please. You're welcome to the program.
Good morning.
All right, gentlemen, our pleasure to have you join us on the program this morning. Kirian, you're not the only one that struggles with Professor Bolodoku's last name. Students and colleagues just shorten it to Bolo. That's what they call him for short. You know, Professor Ige Bolodoku, pleasure to have you. Now, gentlemen, will you listen to the excerpts from the first part of our conversation yesterday? And where it was restated that the privatization exercise envisaged three tiers, that's in the value chain: generation, transmission, and distribution. And that the distribution company is ordinarily expected to be the revenue generator that will collect and then feed the entire chain and ensure its sustenance. But there's also a critical leg in the creation of the electricity market, because it was clear that it would be an imperfect market at the beginning. There will be challenges, there will be shortfalls, so there will be need for shock absorbers. So before we get into the areas of corporate governance, which were matters that arose yesterday, happily we have Wonodi, who is here with us in the studio. He had been our guest sometime in the past, Managing Director, CEO of NBET, which was part of the entity intended to create stability in the initial stages and also going forward in the electricity market. Mr. Wonodi, we are seeing increasingly the challenges that the DISCOs in particular are facing, and analysts would argue that it is the challenges that they face that continue to hobble the growth of the power sector. Last week, AEDC, of course, then became the first domino, to fall on account of its financial crisis, which then led to the creditors taking over the shares of the consortium that had 60%. From your perspective, just what is wrong with the way the DISCOs have been carrying on their business and therefore, as it were, rattling the electricity market that ordinarily by now some persons would expect should have been stable?
I mean, I think that the AEDC issue, what just happened in AEDC, is very symptomatic of the foundations of some of the privatization funding. I think the director is making the point, or made the point that, we always wanted the DISCOs to be clear of debt, and at the time it was being sold, government took all the liabilities and put in a company and expected investors to come with their own equity and fund the acquisition and then raise loans, take debt to do the expansion and do the work. But what they did was actually some of them took loans to buy the companies. And then when they started struggling, they were unable to meet their commitments to the loans. So if they had used equity, which is their own private money, then they would not be in a position to, what's the word, to panic, right? So what you say about equity, say that it's a patient capital. You put your money, you watch it, and when things start getting better, then you start getting your return. But if you take a loan, after 1 year, you have to service it. And if you're not servicing it, you start defaulting on your loan, and then you start having problems with your creditors. So that's what happened with the case of AADC, and we've seen it in all the others. And once the market becomes is struggling, then you find out that you cannot attract further capital. No other person will give you money because they're watching you and you're claiming that you're not able to make collections and things like that. And then it leads to that. So the foundation of how so many of these people funded the acquisition is at the root of the type of problems you have in AEDC, which is using loan to buy the thing. So that's what people say, that maybe some of the people who acquired it did not have the deep pockets to do what they need to do post-privatization, because they really needed to make the investment in expansion of the disco and then having money to run the business without getting into the problem. So capitalization is a big issue, the foundation of the acquisition capital.
All right. Let's go to Professor Bolodeku. Prof, you've listened to the first speaker and, of course, the excerpts that we relayed before the commencement of this conversation, which, of course, touched on vital issues concerning the operational methodology of the discourse in Nigeria. Some persons will also express concerns about the faulty start during the unbundling of PHCN as part of the problem, as the last speaker also mentioned. What's your own view about the epileptic performance of this arm of the power chain?
Thank you very much. It's a combination of issues, really, and we must look at it in that particular context. Now, in terms of effectiveness, you really can't govern what you don't control. And I believe from the start, enough due diligence wasn't conducted by those who are taking on this responsibility to acquire the discourse. If you conduct proper due diligence, you will realize your limitations. You will see the sort of risk that is involved, those that you can control, those you may not be able to control. When you are dealing with this area, you really can't separate, as it is now, any of the value chain from the other, because it is from the start to the end. It's a one-line diagram, and it affects the performance of every component of that chain. We are dealing with discourse. Yes, they have problems from the start, as the last speaker noted, that they used the loans to acquire, this particular assets. But then beyond that, even the ownership structure from the start, you have the core investor having 60%. The government is having 40% of this. Which government wasn't involved in this at all, and that there is 100% in the hands of discourse, that they will have some to play with in inviting other core investors for serious capital contribution. But the 40% that government has, really, you recall that at this period in time, there were lots of agitation by states, because states really claim that most of the assets, of the discourse, they bought them, they contributed. So how come they were not being sold and they were being left out of the scheme? So that led to the federal government actually allowing the states to take stock of their investment, and then, of course, to give them substantial stake in the 40%. Now, this is part of the problem. But for the disco, now, if you understood the need, for instance, that they are the end of the chain, they distribute power. Now, power must get to them to be distributed. Before power gets to them it must be generated. So you move from generation to transmission to distribution. Now, what is the carrying capacity of the discourse? To be able to distribute the transmitted power. If there is no proper evaluation of what is needed to get this done, if there's no proper evaluation of what is required to get the monies in, definitely the discourse will fail. Okay, and that is what we are now witnessing. Now, when you look at the generation, for instance, how much power do we generate? On the whole, how much power can we generate? Now, you move from there to transmission. How much power is transmissible? I mean, the wheeling capacity of the TCN. We read about 4,000 megawatts of power. I mean, what does that translate into a business that wants to make good money? Now, if the transmission company is limited, so what power, and then of course, when you take stock of power loss, on the grid, well, because of the integrity of the transmission lines, then you have a reduced transmission capacity. When it gets to the discos, they require investment. To start with, can the discos even absorb the power that is being generated? If the answer is no, then they really can operate at the ultimate level. So these are the issues of one, investment, the proper risk assessment, the equity, this ownership structure, and all of these are the combined factors that actually militate against the discourse. But lastly, I will say this, that if the discourse are not, they have been carried so far for too long, and they appear to be path dependent on this. If there's a way by which that particular scheme can be changed, because if you are not responsible for the wealth effect of your decisions, you are not motivated to make good decisions. So if government continues to subsidize, pumping money, and then the discourse are so used to it, there is no motivation for them to perform because they are not losing anything. If they are under a threat to lose what they have right now, there could be some tangible motivation because they want to stay in this business. So they will have to do the needful, to stay in it. And of course, the cost of capital is very high in Nigeria. This is a very serious sector. May government look at the cost of capital to this discourse? At what rate are they lending? If it is excessive rate, then you don't expect them to do so well, given the kind of problems that that are intractable, some of which they may not also be able to control. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor Bolodeku, for the issues that you have raised. Of course, we will return to you in the course of the conversation. Just to set a marker to those issues, talk about the issues around the ownership structure and why it appears to be problematic, and the fact that continued government support also has an implication for the wealth effect of the decisions by the discos. How are they incentivized to ramp up their performance when they know that at the end of the day, support will always come from government, plus the high cost of capital and the apparent lack of due diligence at the initial stage. Professor Bolo, thanks a lot. We'll come back to you. Let's go over to our Benin Network Center, where we earlier introduced Abel. Abel is of the Corporate Communications Department of BEDC. That's the Benin Electricity Distribution Company. Now, Abel, if you are in Benin, and I'm sure our viewers who are in Benin and who have power to watch this program at this time will be listening attentively to you. There are tons of complaints about the performance of BEDC in Benin. And as we speak, you know that the Edo State government has set up its own independent power generation. And it's also erecting its own distribution, as it were, cables to government offices and other important locations around the city and in the state. Benin City and its environs in other major towns of the city almost perpetually in darkness. Why is this so?
Thank you very much. In Benin Electricity PLC, we cannot devote our services without complaint. But what we've tried to do is to put a robust complaint mechanism to address all these issues. Most of these challenges we're having is because, one, in our zone, we are dealing with the restive people. In South here, the orientation is different. So one of our major problems is to orientate our people here. By the time we start operation within this our zone, or our 4 states, you will discover that most of the people here, the orientation of paying bills is not there. Because most of the major problem we're facing is the revenue shortfall as a result of indebtedness, as my colleague has mentioned. How do you get this money? Because most of them here are not willing to pay. In a situation where some 70-year-old man will say, I've never paid electricity bill. So the onus is on us to start a lot of rehabilitation we've been doing for the past 7.5 years. Complaints, yes, we have complaints, but we've tried as much as possible to address most of the complaints. Because we know customers need to be served, and we're trying to serve them better, we have a lot of robust mechanisms put in place to address all these complaints. All our 27 business units have complaint services where you attend to them. We have our ad-bound services in Lagos, where we have over 70 people attending to complaints. We also have in-house in our Benin office, where we have 18 people. We have up to 5 ad-bound and in-bound where we attend to complaints online. And physically too, we also attend to complaints, not only in our offices, but even our business managers, when they go out, we attend to complaints. We even have a system where all the complaints get to the center and we make sure that these complaints are resolved. Yes, we have issues with some of the customers, but the most important thing is for us to be able to attend to these issues as at when due. Our complaint mechanism is so interesting because we make sure that all customers are heard. We have various complaint mechanisms. In our system here, there's no complaint that does not get to everywhere. Once you have your complaint, there's a ticket that sends it all through. But I don't want to bother us with the issue of our complaint mechanism. But the major issue we have here is to reiterate our customers. In Benin Disco, most of the customers believe there's a resource control. The power is generated here. Why must we pay? And we need this money because this is the money we need to service the value chain. The value chain in Benin here is such that we need to collect. Since we started, we've been collecting just little above 50% of our collection. Over 8 billion is our MO bill every month. And we collect just little above 4 billion, most especially in the last 5 months, between 4 and 5 billion. So about 45% of this money is not being collected. Part of our aim is to make sure that customers are happy. We even introduce what we call debt discount, where customers have up to 20 to 25% discount. And we give up to 48 months to pay these debts, for as much as 60 months, depending on the kind of debts. We know our customers are not happy with us, but we're doing a lot to make them happy. In terms of Edo State, yes, there's intermittent power period. We know we don't have enough power generation, so it's a welcome development. We need to work together. And we try as much as possible to cooperate with them so I can work together, because the better for every sector if the Edo State and the Benin City can work together and make our people happy. In terms of darkness, I don't think we're treating Benin darkness. We've tried as much as possible to give good power to our people in Benin City. Some areas in GRA have up to 21 hours light. Some have 16 hours. It can be verified in GRA and in some areas. We have up to 20 hours regular light. Though some areas we don't have up to that, but most cases we try as much as possible to give light to our people. When we talk about the issue in Edo State, it's peculiar. Before now, we are the first disco that you can predict. We give 3 hours on, 3 hours off, 12 hours. Everybody is sure of 12 hours. Until the system in Benin collapsed late 2018 when the 2x60 failed. And since then, we've not been able to get the same quantity of energy in Benin here. One of the 60 MVA was replaced. It's old. It's generating 45 megawatts. The second one is a mobile track from Bayelsa, which is 40 MVA. It's only generating 25 megawatts. So as against 120, we're running 45 plus, which is 70 megawatts. So these are some of those challenges that is inhibiting the BEDC from being optimal. But with this, we're still seeing how we can get our other generators, the non-grid. We're working with them. We've interviewed a lot of them. We're trying to use it to balance our energy so I can serve our people better. So in Benin Disco, yes, we have our challenges, but we're not putting Benin people in darkness. From terms of complaints, we've resolved our complaints to the extent that we're understanding our customers now. Initially, when we started in Benin Disco, they block our gate every day. They stayed there for hours. But now we understand each other better, that we're able to dialogue and open a lot of room for our customers to discuss with them. Even for communities, we have a community hall where we sit with them and we discuss the issues, and I think we're getting better each day. Yes, for Benin, yes, the problems are there, but I can assure you we're getting better day by day. We're solving it, and I think we're delivering some good services for the people of our franchise area, both in Benin, Edo, Delta, Ondo, and Ekiti. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Abel. Well, my colleague Kieran is asking whether you have answered the question fully. Amongst the points you raised, I'm a bit taken aback. I mean, I will just mention this and not get to drill into it. You say the people are not used to paying electricity bill. Well, in the manner of speaking, that's probably defamatory. I grew up in that city when there was ECN, and we had a meter in our house. From ECN to NEPA, there was also a meter. You will see the meter, it will be running, it will be going around. And a number of houses have long since acquired the prepaid meter. My mom has a prepaid meter in our house. So who are those not paying? You talked about the areas in Benin City that have light. Ihama is also street. People tell you that perpetually they are. No, Kieran, you can ask. They will tell you. And we have NTA in Benin that the city is perpetually in darkness. That's you keep just say, why do you have difficulty? If it is true that people have difficulty in paying and you are seeking to reorientate them, why don't you give them meters?
Thank you very much. In terms of metering, if you look at the records, among the discos, Benin Disco is the second highest in terms of meter delivery. We're giving meters. The meters are not enough. We've given over 450 meters to our customers, which are in the range of 900,000 plus. The only issues we have with meter now, like we said, is the meter bypass, which we're also addressing. You can see that because a lot of our meters are being bypassed. If you install 100 meters today, I'll tell you 70% of it is being bypassed. And that's why our meters is being put on the pole. We're structurally doing way too. You see, the issue in our environment here is a little bit different. When I say people are not paying bill, I didn't say all of them. I'm saying most of them believe, yes, the power comes from here. You're talking about your area in Benin. If you go to Ughelli and many other areas, I mean, the Transcorp there know when they block the road and tell them that they are the one that's generating the power, they must give them power free. If you go to Europe, we have a lot of instances. It's not an issue of maybe I'm just throwing words. But the issue is, it is real that in our region here, it's a very restive region. Yes, some pay bills, I'm not saying it's 100%, but I say most believe, why must they pay for bill? Because the power is generated at their backyard. That's what I'm saying. So we need to reiterate to say, no, this is no longer government, this is private sector, and we need to pay for this power that we're giving out to you. So once we pay, we'll be able to get back to be able to generate more and do better. When you talk about Ihama, I only use that as an example. I'm not saying that it's only Ihama that will have good power. If you go to other states, Asaba there's an area where we have 20 hours. In Ekiti too, we have. I'm just giving you an example that it's not as bad as being said. Yes, Nigerians want better energy. We know we're not yet there. We're going to get there. But the truth is, we've done a lot to make sure that we give power to our people. I don't think we come to business to throw Benin into darkness. That's an assertion I don't think is right. And that's what I'm trying to say. In Edo State, I will say it vividly. I'm not only in charge of corporate communication, I'm also in charge of Edo State business. And every day I try to monitor our activities. Yes, we are not able to give them the 24/7 we expected. But like I said, the bottlenecks and challenges we have, we're trying to make sure that we go around it and Benin is serviced at the level, optimal level they expected to be. Thank you.
All right. I'm just wondering, how you have been dealing with this issue of restiveness that you mentioned on several occasions in your submission. It means that it's something to really worry about, because if a situation occurs where people don't believe that they should pay for power, it's indeed a problem. It's indeed a problem because power has to be paid for in the first instance. That is how the discourse can survive. We will return to you for further clarifications because my colleague Kingsley has noted that it's not what it used to be, right? And he doesn't want to believe that aggressive nature of people in Benin now should get to the point where people will refuse to pay their bills. All right, let's return to Abuja here, where we have Unana Malo. You've listened to all the speakers, right? Raised a number of issues, but I just want to highlight some of them so that you can key in from that. Lack of diligence in the unbundling process, which you also spoke about yesterday. Disco ownership structure, including, of course, members of the board, and then government financial interventions, from time to time, resulting to a low motivation to work.
Well, thank you very much, and thanks for asking me to come back again. I want to state very clearly that it is not correct to say that there was no proper due diligence in the process of reforming the power sector. Yesterday, I stated very clearly that it started with policy, and policy was debated all over the place. It took a minimum of 8 months to debate the policy, and the policy was eventually passed after stakeholders had argued out the policy. The Federal Executive Council passed it. Then thereafter, a law was also crafted out of the policy. The law also went through the normal process of review by those who are appointed to do so. And after a very careful process, going through the various readings, it was passed. And thereafter, implementation commenced. But even before the implementation could commence, there was a process of implementation to see how these things could play out within the period. The companies were individually incorporated, and they began to work. Staff were moved to various companies, whether they are in distribution, in transmission, or in generation. And then there was a seeming trading between the companies over a period of time before the process of privatization started. If it is due diligence by the investors that is the problem, yes, there was a time we had a problem where Labour will not allow any investor to go in, and that problem was overcome because immediately after handover, the owners were given 1 year within which to study the loss levels within their respective jurisdictions and then submit to NAC. So that problem was overcome. Due diligence was not a problem. The issue of ownership, government in its wisdom decided that 40% has to be kept, 60% should go, because this is a critical utility. You must have some leverage over the utility at any point in time, since it affects not only the welfare of the people, but also the welfare of the economy. It affects production. And also given the fact that my colleague said states had also been investing in the network, you needed to protect a certain portion so that when states eventually want to have their portion, you can also give them, which NAC had undertaken the study to know what each state had invested into the network before privatization. And that study has been done. Is waiting for implementation when the National Council of Privatization approves the implementation. So all these things were done carefully. The only problem here is that we had challenges that were coming, and we did not focus on the challenges when they started coming. The challenges come normally in two different dimensions. There is the technical challenge, which has to do with how power reaches the consumer. You see, when you generate and you transmit, there is an interface problem between the transmission company and the discos. That problem has to be resolved. We were already working on that with the support of the African Development Bank to resolve those challenges of interface between the discos and the transmission company. Then there is also the challenge, the technical challenge within the disco itself. And that is where the managerial acumen of those who have acquired the disco comes in. How are they able to resolve those small and many challenges? Of course, we know that there were transformers that were overloaded, transformers that were overused and have overstayed their time that needed to be replaced. There were cables that were running, crisscrossing the street without being properly aligned. There were so many issues requiring huge investments. That takes us to the issue of how do you mobilize investments into the discos. And the perception that was that give them a clean balance sheet. Let them go in with a clean balance sheet so that they can attract funds and invest to clean up this particular, the discourse. However, in the process, immediately after takeover, there were some regulatory issues that started throwing back debts into the balance sheet of the discos, and almost immediately the discos became insolvent and difficult to manage. These are the issues that the current government has been working to resolve in order to make the sector more liquid, have more resources to run with, and also be able to make sure that the issues of people are taken care of. Look at the presidential metering program, for instance, where meters were provided by Mr. President and insisted that everybody must be linked with meters. This metering program has been going on, and also more programs to meter people is going on. However, despite these challenges, what happens is that you have people who are very quick at bypassing meters. And just like the man from Benin said, there are people who think power is a dividend of democracy. I will end with this. There was a village in Kano that they got their power during the reign of Audu Bako, and it was given to them as their own dividend of democracy. So when the Kano Disco was carved out and there was a need for them to pay for power, it became an issue. Until Kano Disco had to go and sit with the community and say, yes, at that time, government was different. Something has changed. And you have to understand now that power is a product. It is going to be used not only as a social product, but also an economic product. And the community accepted and started paying for power after much education, which I guess the Benin man was trying to say, that there is a need for a serious reorientation of our people to see power as a product, and not just as a social commodity.
You know, Marlo, thank you very much for this point that you have raised with regard to that. When we discussed the issues around the power sector some time ago, there was a guest we had from Lagos Network Center, Odion. It deals with the financial aspect of it. And I was giving the example of ROEB, that's the Rural Electrification Board. And he said his father worked in ROEB. ROEB was started by the administration, military government of Samuel Ogbemudia. When ROEB was functioning in the rural parts of the then Midwest, there were meters, and you had to feed the meters with coins. So if your credit got exhausted, you were in darkness. So the whole idea, if you want to educate people, you educate people. If you are used to getting power for free, of course you say that thing like this, but if you are used to paying for it, you pay for it. The next question is going to Rumudaka Wanodi. Well, when you listen to Marlo, I mean, and we hear this all the time, businesses are supposed to be in business to generate revenue and then stay afloat. It would require a presidential initiative for discos to be getting meters, for them to collect money that they would need to survive, and then for the others in the value chain to also survive. Why, in your opinion, has it been difficult for discos to say, look, there are ways we can introduce technology to ensure that we capture at least a substantial part of the revenue due to us, on the one hand, and then what is NBET doing in all of this, and what should it be doing?
Well, I think that the government's intervention is born out of, one basic thing. First, the government is concerned and is interested to make sure that the populace, at least to some extent, have steady electricity, or that there is an equilibrium in everything. So to the point that there is a gap, government would want to, and it's also a political thing, to make sure that, they come and fill the gap. But the other part is that also government has realized, just like the director said, that somewhere along the line, there are some regulatory issues that made it difficult for capital raising, right? So when you have a tariff and you pull it back, and even last year, NEC put out a tariff, the ministry, earlier this year, the ministry said, pull it back, you cannot go ahead. It causes a problem for investors to actually go out and raise money. So where you have a leadership that is wobbling one way or the other, government even hobbles itself from taking a decisive action against the discos. And then, Truant discos will begin to take that as an opportunity to do what they do not, that they should be doing, right? Because government has created a gap in its alignment of goals and leadership. So when that happens, then government finds out that, look, people are complaining about meter, they have to go and get in there. The one thing, though, to say is that it's good to hear the discourse complain about collection issues and everything. So maybe on the part of the discourse, the due diligence, when they came in, they said, we're going to come here and reduce ATC, the technical and commercial losses. The commercial losses is collections and theft and everything. So they should have come with that technology that you talked about. They should have known Nigerians' disposition to paying or not paying. If you have a toll gate here, as far as the gate covers the whole road, people will pay. But if there is a space to bypass, people will not pay. It's not only in Nigeria, it's everywhere in the world, right? So if you give people a gap, they would always bypass the meter. So what they're saying is that putting the meters on the pole and having a smart meter might be a good way to take care of that. But the problem becomes the cost of that technology and how much Nigerians can afford to pay. I think there is one other thing about the theft. The theft issue comes from affordability or trust issue. The disco that I have the meter is in my house, is reading, but most of the time they supply me power when I don't need it. You're at work, and the meter runs through your house. Maybe your fridge and every other thing is gets cold, but when you come home and you actually want to enjoy the electricity, you don't enjoy it, you have to go and put on your generator. So there is something about the service and its usefulness to the person who is getting it. So that is one part of it. But I want to come back to affordability, right? If you think about how things have risen, how prices have risen and everything, right? The amount of money the average Nigerian has after rent, school fees, health, and what have you, to pay for power is shrinking. It's been shrinking, right? So the incentive to bypass meter is not only there's affordability issue, and then there's the trust issue, right? The trust that what I'm getting from the disco, even through the meter, is fair to me. So I think one of the ways that is being addressed by NERC, and we have pushed for this, is that to say that even where you say that cost-reflective power tariff, which is that I pay the exact cost, right? It might be cost-reflective to the disco, to the GENCO, to transmission company, and everybody working, that they've spent 1,000 naira to produce power, and therefore you have to pay them 1,000. But you have to look at it from the point of the consumer, right? And I keep making this small analogy, that it might cost 1,000 naira to make a pot of soup, whatever. But if you add salt of 50 naira instead of 20 naira, it will still cost you about that, but it will be useless to you, right? So the power has to also have a value to the consumer. And how would it have value? It has to come when the person needs it or when it makes sense. If I live in Maraba and I have to come to Abuja during the day to work, and you give me power from 8 a.m. till 6 p.m. when I come home, there's no power for me, I will eat. You're not serving me, right? So the idea of service-based tariff, which says that power is going to come to you 8 hours, 12 hours, and a time where it should work for you, makes sense. So I think that is one migration, and that could increase trust that will make people actually want to pay for power. Because there's no need for me to pay for power at a time it's not serving me, right? So if you begin to give people service-based tariff, and someone in Maraba or someone in Okokomaiko or someone in Oyibo in Port Harcourt who are outside of the main city, and you're giving them power 6 p.m. to 12 p.m., 4 a.m. to 8 a.m., when they're at home and doing things, that power means more to them than giving them power 6 a.m. till 6 p.m., and that's 12 hours of no use, right? So service-based tariff will give you different hours of 8 hours, 12 hours, but it's more important that it comes when you need it, right? So if we begin to migrate that, then it will actually give people value for money, and maybe people will begin to want to pay more. One last thing about this value for money. People say that, oh, if I use my generator, it costs me so much. It will cost me about 200 naira per unit instead of coming from the grid. If I use a disco, it will be 60 naira. Therefore, people should be happy to pay 60 naira or 40 naira. But the truth of the matter is that when you say to your generator, give me power, it will give you power. That reliability aspect of service is very important. That's why people buy generator. It's not because it's cheap. It's because it's reliable. So the discos and NEC and all the things is to move people where you can give them power at a time it works for them. It's very important, and then people will be more likely willing to pay, because then I can forget my generator. But if I pay my generator, I pass my neighbor and still have to pay that NEPA, I'll bypass the NEPA. You know, so the incentive, if I can, I will, right, for most people. So, so to come back, trust and affordability is a big thing in trying to manage the issue of power theft and collection.
Well, that's a very good analogy. But on the other hand, if you know, Maraba that you gave as an example, if you may have in a particular street, perhaps 5 buildings, 2 or 3 of them could be residential. The next one could be business enterprise, and they all have the same line. So if you give power there, then the other person uses his own power for business. They are on the same on the same area. So how do you now separate? How do you now separate it? You know, because some people also in their homes have things that preserve in the freezer, maybe soup or something, you know, that could go sour if there's no power while the person is at work, and all of that, you know. So, but it's a good analogy, really.
No, but let me just follow up, because this is very important, right? There are a few issues, and the power rotation could also help in planning, right? So if you go to Maraba, there is a market. There are market areas, right? There are market and schools. So those ones you can still drop the line for those areas during the day. If you're living in a residential place, you should not be conducting full business in that area, right? So if you have mixed development, it makes it challenging. That's one of the points that city planning and development control needs to be. So if you come to Maitama or if you go to places where ordinary should be residential, people are mixing up everything. Exactly. And development control should do this. So the infrastructure has to work together. You can't build roads for residential community, and next minute it turns to industrial or commercial, and you have choked up places. So it happens not just on roads, it will happen in infrastructure, it will happen in water supply and things like that. So it's an aspect. We cannot design for the wrong part of everything.
Well, we're going to take a short break, you know, but before that, I'd like to get Professor Ige Balaluku once more before he loses the line of thought, because I'd like him to speak to some of the issues raised by the last 2 speakers, especially Yunana Malo, who is the director of Energy Bureau for Public Enterprises. He actually hinted on the issue of technical challenges and lack of managerial acumen among the discos, you know, that we have in the country. Prof, you were once special assistant to Ondo State Governor on power. Do you share his views on these technical issues as regards the low performance level of discos in Nigeria?
Thank you very much. Let me quickly first address some of the issues that have been raised based on my contribution. I talked about due diligence. My focus then was due diligence on the part of the discos. Of course, the federal government was selling, so there was need for transparency in the process transparency, and they did everything possible to make that happen, just to build trust, and then invite people, or perhaps maybe motivate those who would want to invest to come in. But that is one part. Government is asking or acting for itself. The discos are acting for themselves as well. I don't want to believe that there is no problem that we are finding now that were not foreseeable at this time. If you're investing in the power sector as a co-investor with with technical competencies, then you would know that there are some of these issues that are not within your control. There is nothing happening now that wasn't foreseeable then. You don't control power generation. So what is your own assessment, risk assessment around power generation that you don't control? Because ultimately you need power as a DisCo to be able to operate. You do not control the transmission. So what were the risks around transmission that you assessed for purpose of the solution? I mean, are those risks easily solvable? And if you can solve it, so which means you don't have problem receiving power at your own end. And above all, what is your own capacity to be able to meet up and have operational efficiency? Now, if you didn't do all of this and you ran into investing in power at the DisCo level, and these issues are now coming and we are confronting it, then you wouldn't have done proper due diligence of the investment you are making. You shouldn't have, you would not have done proper risk assessment of the enterprise that you are taking over. Because the whole essence of all of this assessment is to align your risk with your goal, is to look at, is to prevent operational surprises and losses, and ultimately to take advantage of new possibilities. Now, I guess someone has talked about clean balance sheets. The reason why that hasn't worked, even when it was achieved at some point, is that people have seen clearly that is beyond balance sheet because operations have to go on. People want to make profit and then returns on investment. How would that happen within the kind of systems that is in play as it is? If power is not assured and it's not going to go up, if transmission, can also be humbled or hobbled, and if your own capacity cannot be developed because you really can't develop outside of reality. If DisCos were to invest and develop capacity in all these areas and the power is not coming, when is the return to come? Now, no generation company, all generation companies will want an assurance or even a guarantee that when they generate power, it will be paid for. Now, that payment for, if it is given by that guarantee is based on the assurances that the DisCo would be able to collect. What is the preparation or the preparedness of the DisCos to be able to collect this money? Power theft is part of the game in any power sector. So if DisCos are complaining about power theft now and that they're having problems solving it, it's because they really are not facing the reality in the market in which they are operating. There will always be an attempt to steal. It does not matter what you put in place. What you can do at the minimum is to ensure that you have put in the right investment to minimize your loss. There will be some losses, but you minimize it to a large extent to make room for operational efficiency. Now, those are the areas. Now, with the DisCos, in fact, our own experiences then was that, the DisCos are dependent on this enumerated billing, that they just sit down, desktop billing, I call it. They sit down in the offices and then they make up their mind that this month we are going to generate about 15 billion or 8 billion. And then they start writing the invoices for people to come and pay, whether or not you use it or you don't use it. That went on for too long. They were part dependent on it. They loved it. And now another life is possible, and that is metering. It is that transition to that other life that is causing a problem. But in fairness to DisCo, I don't know really. I would say this, that if we really want to solve their problems, there has to be some external, some help that is external to DisCo. Now, let me quickly put it in context. There is the roadmap agreement, the electricity roadmap agreement that was signed with Siemens then. The expectation was that by 2021, we will be generating about 7,000 megawatts of power, and that will move up to 11,000 megawatts of power in 2023. 2023 is just around the corner. Now, the question is, are we generating 7,000 megawatts of power? Can we transmit 7,000 or more megawatts of power? And can the DisCos receive that amount based on the kind of stations that they have? So, and the ultimate goal was to move to 25,000 megawatts of power. Now, where are we on all of these plans or collaborations? Now, if the power is not going, if the power is coming, it is being transmitted, definitely the discos to remain in business must expand their capacity. Whether then, and that is where you need infusion of capital to be able to do so. When you are expanding capacity, you must also be expanding your collection capacity. I mean, in fact, whatever you need to do, you do. And the economics must add up. The investment must add up. And this is where, because this is where the money is coming from. So if all of these developments are being taken care of at each stage and component of the value chain, then discos will be able or should be able to operate optimally. Thank you.
Professor Bolo, thank you very much. We're just having some slight distraction here from one of our guests. Thanks a lot. We're going to take a short break now. When we return, there's an issue that I would like to raise with respect to corporate governance of the discos.
Ministry of Works and Housing has the responsibility to help improve the quality and the quantity of the road infrastructure assets, which are the roads and the bridges and the highways. At the moment, we have over 13,000 kilometers of road network under repair, reconstruction, or rehabilitation out of the existing 35,000 kilometers of federal road network. These 13,000 kilometers are comprising about 850 different contracts which the ministry superintends across Nigeria. We are fulfilling the mandate of our ministry to expand the connectivity of Nigeria's states and by extension the towns and villages through road transport.
Nigerian youths are about the greatest assets the country has at the moment. It is therefore not surprising that the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari is strategically responding to the yearnings of the youth through multiple projects and programs. Youth entrepreneurship support years by Bank of Industry, the Youth Investment Fund by the CBN, and several other conditional cash transfer programs. Recruitment of 774,000 social workers, majority of whom are youths, and so many other projects that are beneficial to youths directly or indirectly. If the administration can do all this, definitely with a degree of patience and time, it can achieve more. Nigerian youths must come together to say no to terrorism, no to vandalism, and no to all disruptive tendencies. Hashtag Youth for Greater Nigeria, pacifying the youths, unifying the nation.
Finally, the hero of Nigeria's democracy has arrived. He shall usher us into a new phase of development, peace, and prosperity. He is the father of the new Nigeria, His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari, GCFR. Welcome to another season of giving Nigerians hope yet again. We are sure of a great future for both ourselves and generations yet unborn. We look forward to your leading us as a nation into our manifest destiny. Though the challenges against us as a people are many, we know that your leadership shall set us on the right path to our greatness. A new dawn beckons on us all, and having you as our president is a precursor to this. Thank you for believing in Nigeria. This message is from the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA.
Norwich City are desperate for another 3 points in their battle for survival in the Premier League. Can they cause an upset against the Hammers? This Saturday, it's West Ham United versus Norwich City on the Premier League Live, showing on the network service of the NTA from 3:30 p.m. The Premier League Live is brought to you by Baba Ijebu and powered by Integral.
Right, you are welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We're on the home stretch of this conversation. And just before we went on that short break, I said we were going to touch on aspects relating to corporate governance, because it was a matter that also came up yesterday. And the question is going to Professor Bolo Doku, of course, who's a professor of comparative corporate law and governance systems. Well, Prof, let's just ask this plainly. Are the discourse on the face of the evidence that we have being properly governed? I ask this question against the background of what we get to hear about and what we do get to know. I've not heard of any of the AGMs by any of the discos. We hear of boardroom squabbles. We also hear of issues around executive compensation. One of our guests yesterday was saying that board members get paid in US dollars for sitting as sitting allowances, and that there are humongous amounts that members do get, and in the meantime they are unable to deliver on their mandate. Are external directors actually useful to the discourse against the backdrop that government itself holds 40% of these shares, and it would appear that a number of the decisions that we do get to read about are coming from government rather than from the board itself, which ordinarily should take responsibility for the health or failure of those entities.
Thank you very much. I guess the template of corporate governance is known, is settled. It is left for those that are governing corporations to really govern well. And I have said it much earlier, that if you are not paying the price of bad decisions, you are not likely to change your decision to an efficient one. So if you say today that all we hear is fat salaries and also payments in foreign currencies, and yet there is nothing to show for it in terms of capacity expansion and all of that, because that should be the one that worries the discourse at the boardroom level. If there is a board in place, there has to be some strategies around the main objectives of this discourse. And it's about, as I said, all of the internal control systems must be put in place. It's about understanding it's about understanding the enterprise risk assessment, and of course the strategies to be able to resolve those things. Now, if that is not happening, then you have to look at the ownership structure again. Now, if you have 60% of a business that is perhaps running at a loss, so to say, or dependent on the kind of collection systems that really, does not all go well for the business, there should be some worries. So in so many places, it's out to expand, bring in capital and all of that. If it is not happening, it is because they are not being held accountable for the problems that their conduct has been causing. Now, you raised the issue of government having 40% of this. I said earlier that I had wished that government didn't have, that amount of stakes. And if they have, maybe it's time for them to, and for government to realize that perhaps that 40% could be sold to strategic investors. And those who have claims, like the states, could be compensated for whatever investment that they had done, because they also did their investment assessment, then they took stock. So there was value attached to what they had invested. So perhaps it is time for government to let go of this by selling, to strategic investors and be a proper regulator, because one leg in, one leg out might send some confusing signals. It doesn't mean that government will still not intervene at the right time or at the appropriate periods, but that they need not remain a shareholder. Let those who can add value to governance be on the board and then be able to. And then, of course, if there is proper regulation, there has to be some milestones of achievement that is set. While government is doing its own support on the side, there should be some milestones, for this discourse to meet. And if they are not meeting it incessantly, of course, maybe it is time for them. It would be time for government to reevaluate their licenses. After all, banks, when banks don't do well, government or CBN looks at its licenses and then they come down with the hammer, and it's a signal to the rest, or of those that are operating in the industry, to sit up and do the needful in terms of effective government governance system. If that is not happening now, it's because of indulgence. The regulators are not looking sternly into these anomalous corporate governance situations, and also coming up with modalities to get it resolved and solved as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Well, gentlemen, the issue of corporate governance was actually discussed yesterday. When Yunana Malo also spoke extensively on that, and of course, Prof has now raised a very pertinent issues concerning that. In fact, talking down on the 40% equity of the federal government, in the discourse. So according to him, it's also making it difficult for the discourse to function effectively and efficiently because of the one leg in and one leg out that he talked about. All right, let's go back to Benin, where we have, I guess, what should appear now to be your closing thoughts on this matter. How is BEDC planning to tackle some of the issues that you admitted earlier on with respect to giving power to the people of Edo State, especially Benin, that my colleague Kingsley pointed out has been in darkness for some time, although you did not agree to that. But all the same, they're not having 24 hours power supply. What are going to be the new inputs from BEDC to ensure that power is to some extent regularized in Edo State?
Thank you very much. In Benin Electricity PLC, a lot of strategies has been put in place. In the last 2 years, we've been seeing how we want to bring non-TCN off-grid power to add to our distribution so as to make it balance it 50-50. At the time, we've interviewed about 34 GENCOs, where we should list about 24 of them, and it's ongoing. I want to establish some small mini generation island within all our areas, such that you have 5-10 megawatts to serve a lot of areas within the DISCO, so I can serve them effectively. And like I said, the Osisi-Omo, we've been meeting with Edo State to see how we can work together with them, and we're still talking, although we have not finally agreed. Even Delta State, we're working with them, their IPP, so that we can jointly help them to distribute those power, so I can have enough power for our people. This is a very big business. It's not a business for the DISCO alone. It's a business that accommodates all. We just have to collaborate and work together. The power being generated from the grid, yes, it's not enough, but even though we have some transmission bottleneck, we're trying to rev off our own distribution bottleneck because we have some PIP projects that have been approved that we're trying to run. So that once this distribution bottleneck are taken care of, once we're able to sign bilateral agreement with some of these independent power generators, we're able to transmit those power to our people. We signed a lot of MOUs. In fact, about 5 or 6 MOUs have been signed in the last 1 year, so that once those people generate power, we can together be able to service our customers. One of those major MOUs with Niger Delta Power. I think that one was done April, and some was done in July. So what we're doing, we're not resting. In Benin Electricity, we know our job is to give enough power to our people. Yes, we're not there, but a lot's been done, and I think in the next few months, we should see that most of our areas will be well covered. What we're doing now is to see how we can open up our distribution bottlenecks. Most of our obsolete distribution substations are being given a facelift. Most of the breakers and everything is being changed so that we can be more effective in delivering the power dividend that our people are expecting.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We are pressed for time. We still have 2 guests with us here in the studios. Want to get their closing thoughts as well. My question is going to Mr. Wanodi. The view has been expressed in some quarters that the franchise areas for the DISCOs would appear to be too large for some of them to effectively manage. Abuja covers the AEDC, covers the Federal Capital Territory, covers Kogi, covers Niger, covers Nasarawa, I believe, and so on and so forth. Might it conduce to greater efficiency if these franchise areas were shrunk and then new areas reallocated to competent investors?
There are 2 things to look at that, right? So if you carve out Abuja, Federal Territory, out of Niger, Nasarawa, and all, then you begin to ask yourself how economically viable will those other ones be? Because there's a crop subsidy between the big areas and the smaller areas. So that is one part. I'm not saying that if you carve it out, you cannot provide better service, but you might find out that even the more rural areas where you're providing the service, the rates will be much higher because of how dispersed and what you need. So one way or the other does not make the point that immediately you do the franchise areas, that it will get better. If you have wholesome, stable regulatory and environment, right, and understand a lower cost of capital, I mean, the prof talked about high cost of capital, then people will deploy. And then, we've talked about corporate governance. I want to make something very clear. Most people tend not to understand. The disco business is highly regulated because it is very monopolistic. It is a monopoly of no order that you've seen, right? So when you talk about UBA, you talk about Glo, you talk about MTN, they have regulators, but they have competition. They have competition, and that competition forces them to do things differently, right? In the case of discos, there is a total monopoly. And to the prof's point, you have this issue of moral hazard where government puts money and there is nothing they have to do. So it is important that the regulator is strong and firm and independent so that it can work, right? So UBA or Glo can decide where it wants to put a new tower, right, based on what it's serving and how it sees the market. In the case of disco, you should actually not be able to put a transformer until you've agreed with NERC the value of that transformer and what it will result to this.
Is that over-regulation?
Huh?
Is that over-regulation?
It's not over-regulation. It's not over-regulation. That's why I say it's highly regulated.
If it makes business sense, why not?
Yeah, exactly. That's why I'm saying that it's highly regulated because it's a monopoly, right? You cannot throw away the license and withdraw the license. If you withdraw the license, where will people have power? You cannot bring Kaduna license and put it in Abuja if you withdraw Abuja license. You can change the management, right? So I'm just saying that, in essence, the corporate governance, you have to strengthen the regulator and make sure that the regulator is firm to be able to do things, and the regulator in itself needs to be also very fair, right? So it's a problem where the regulator puts out a policy or a regulation and the government pulls it back, or the National Assembly. It worsens the case of the industry more than what you have in the boardrooms and everything. So I just want to, emphasize the difference between disco operations, management, and how it works, and the place of the regulator as opposed to, say, the boardroom.
I'm sorry, Kira, I know you are itching to say this. I mean, when you look at some other electricity markets, even in the advanced countries, the whole idea is, as much as possible, you kick in anti-competition rules. Because where you have monopolies, that's where we are stuck with what we are stuck with. Exactly. As Professor Bolodoko was explaining, the boards have no consequence to bear for whether they act or they don't act. Government will pump in, and so the regulator will come, and then they will tweak the regulations to suit them. And at the end of the day, the consumer who is supposed to get the benefit is being shortchanged. Wanodi, I mean, very quickly before we bring in the director of BP.
I mean, I think that we keep saying that people should not forget the reason why the privatization and everything is. It's not so that people can pay tariff. It's not so that people can have a board. It is so that at the end of the day, the consumer has better supply of electricity, and that is what is being shortchanged, right? It's not, at the end of the day, we have not grown that electricity supply to the consuming public, and the issues are all investment. And let me say this whole thing about network expansion, because we did not harp on that in the privatization. Instead, we talked more about reduction of losses. We did not talk so much about expansion. Geometric Aba, they took that little Aba area and they've built about 100 kilometers of 33 kV line and 4 new substations and refurbished the old ones, right? If we had seen comparative investments in all the other distribution company, then the network capability and ability to transfer power, transmit and distribute power will be more. So,
I'm sorry, we have to jump in here.
Yes, so because obviously, I wish you had more time really for you to come in here on this issue of overregulation, which I raised yesterday, and the franchise areas, right? Because the geometric you mentioned, if if other investors, come in, and we can as well break the monopoly you're talking about, and that will be competition in the field. Just like Kingsley raised the issue of the Edo State government, getting involved in having electricity supply in Benin and other parts of the state. So that could also help. At this point, we have to conclude this edition of the program, and I appreciate you for being here this morning. Unana, Malo, just one word.
Malo is still smiling.
Yes, actually, he brought up a very important matter, that of regulation and how it affects the market. If we really want to have the power sector the way we want it, we must allow the regulator to be the regulator. One way to do that is the way we appoint members into the commission. Let it be transparent. I know in India, what they do is that they write exams, and you serve for only one term. Once you are appointed, nobody can take you down.
And they should also worry about their compensation.
Yes. Secondly, the pronouncement by the regulator should be taken seriously. It should not be something that is subject to any kind of political interpretation. It should remain as a market-driven process. It is very critical, and it is what will provide the stability. By the way, the crop of commissioners we have now are more focused, and they have been providing direction more than we had in the past, I must say. And
all right, to you, Nana, Malo, thank you so much for coming again today. And of course, Rumuntaka Wonodi, Pioneer MD, CEO, Nigeria Bulk Electricity Trading, MBIT, and former member of the Presidential Task Force on Power. We also thank you for coming here this morning on the program. Professor Bolo Deku, thank you again for your contribution this morning. You are the Dean, Faculty of Law, University of Lagos, and Professor of Comparative Corporate Law and Governance Systems. We also would like to appreciate Ebel Enachaziam, Chief State Head, Edo State, and also Supervising Corporate Communications Department, BEDC Electricity PLC. Thank you indeed.
All right, that's Good Morning Nigeria for today. Tomorrow is another day, 7 in the morning. Take care of yourselves. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.